It is a great pleasure to have Professor Sudipta Sengupta as our first speaker in this role model interaction that we have started from SN Center. And the idea here is that we invite some women scientists who actually talk about their own experience, and we hope that with some close interaction with our students in these talks, the students learn about what are the kind of experience a woman has chosen the profession of science they have to go through. So I would request our director, Professor Tanushree Shahadas-Gupta, to introduce the speaker.
Thank you, Shakuntala. I'm very happy to introduce today's speaker, who was our role model when we were students. I still remember your articles in this Bengali magazine called Desh, where following her visit to Antarctica, she used to write this, kind of series of these articles, and we would wait when the next edition will be there so that we can read her story. And those of you, the young people in this audience, have not read about those. I'm sure it's still available. So please go through it. What kind of struggle, what kind of excitement and experience one has gone through, it's really mind-boggling. So since then, she was my role model. So I am very happy to introduce a person who was my role model. And I think this is also really, really timely to organize this series of lectures, because this has been an issue, the underrepresentation of the women in science and technology. That has been a serious concern worldwide, because if the women, they don't come forward, you are going to lose 50% of your population. You are not being able to use the full strength that your country has. So it has been a worldwide concern. And the present policies of the government, they are specially designed to really how to tackle this situation. There have been several committees, several schemes. So it is very pertinent that our center is going to organize this series of lectures where all the acclaimed women scientists, they will come, and the students will have a chance to interact with them and get inspired by their story. I will just finish with one comment. There has been also a great concern. The Bhatnagar Prize, which is considered as the highest award of Indian science, why there are so few women? Actually, if you really look at the list of the women awardees of the Bhatnagar Prize, this is really, really minusculous. And it is very gratifying, even 1991, which is more than 10 years, like a decade before that, she actually was awarded with the Bhatnagar Prize. So it must be a story of struggle, lot of overcoming, lot of problems, and especially being one of the women in this male-dominated area. So her experience, I'm sure, is going to be very, very exciting. I myself am looking forward to that talk. Professor Sengupta, the floor is yours now, I guess. Unless Shakuntala wants to make any remark.
No, please, we can get started now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Tanushree, Nivedita, Shakuntala, everyone, for giving such a nice introduction. And I'll be very happy to share my experience as a geoscientist over nearly a half century, I would say. And I hope it will help you in your journey to whatever journey you chose to follow. So I will start with my slides. So sorry, it was not. So the topic of my uh, talk is chase your dreams. So as we all have dreams, I also had a dream to be a scientist. And my father was responsible for this because he himself was a physicist. And in school also, I liked science and wanted to study physics. But when after my higher secondary in 1962, most of you are not born then, uh, I decided to study in Jadavpur University, and I got a chance to study physics there. But at the interview, one of the professor asked me that what do you like to do best next to your study, and I answered that uh, traveling. So he said, then why are you studying physics? You must study geology. I had a very vague idea about geology, but he said if you study geology, you will be travel all your life. And I didn't hesitate after that, and I crossed out geology and wrote physics. My father was not very happy, but I just told him that give me a chance. I will study it for 1 year. If I don't like it, I will come back to physics. And so that's why I become a geologist. I never regretted that decision, that impulsive decision at the beginning of my uh, student college life. And it's my favorite quotation of Eleanor Roosevelt that future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. So after, as I said, I became a geologist, or I studied geology just by accident. But I liked it so much, I stayed in it and continued my studies in Jadavpur University, completed my BSc and MSc there. And I was, uh, although we were only two women students in our class, and in the department altogether there were hardly one more senior woman students, but I enjoyed my study, and I was able to stand first in both my BSc and MSc examination. Then I started my PhD over there under Professor Shubir Ghosh. Now, what is geology? Geology is the study of earth. It takes the help of physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, and many other related science subjects. It has many branches. These are the branches where you can see, but I won't go through all the names here. I will just introduce roughly. Now, prehistoric men had quite a lot of knowledge about geology, because the choice of stone tools in Stone Age, they choose obsidian or flint, which are very sharp, fine, hard kind of minerals for their weapons. The way they discovered ore for iron, for bronze, for copper, it was really amazing and shows that they have a very deep knowledge of art sciences. And what do we do? We study minerals, we study rocks, we study crystals, and those comes under mineralogy, crystallography, petrology. And in rocks, it can be igneous, sedimentary, or metamorphic. Varieties of rock which are formed by deposition of rock in the sea, or by igneous intrusion, volcanic eruptions, and then transformed under great depth to metamorphic rocks. Then, of course, the interesting subject of paleontology, where the geoscientists study fossils. I mean, it's not only about dinosaurs, which is very popular, but also minute, smaller animals, smaller leaves. And since millions of years, actually about 550 millions of years ago, uh, life has come in very minute form, small organism. Since then, there was continuous progression of life, and it's it's a very interesting subject. The human being came very last stage, about about 1 or 2 million years ago. Then, of course, my favorite subject is structural geology. We study deformation of rocks in different scales, in microscopic scale, mesoscopic scale, or in map scale, in a large scale. Then, of course, ore geology. I mean, everything we use today are actually some geologists' hard work were behind it. The iron, then copper, zinc, everything. Coal, as a fossil fuels, we use coal or petroleum. So everything, a geologist's hard work was behind this uh, finding of these ore deposits. Of course, engineering geology is necessary for building dams, tunnel, bridges, and other large structures. And groundwater, the water we depend on these days are mostly groundwater. That is also a hydrogeologist's work. Then the disasters like earthquakes, landslides, and volcano are also subjects of study of geologists. Now, geological timescale is totally different than our timescale. We talk about millions of years. The Earth came to existence about, say, nearly 4.6 million, billions years ago, and then gradually the advent of life, the evolution of life progressed, and that is called the study of stratigraphy, that the fossils are preserved in different strata of the rock, and stratigraphy geologists unravel those history. Now, what are our tools? We used hammer. That is our most essential tool in the field. And then we use clinometer compass. And these days, for location, we use GPS. In our time, we never had GPS, and we had to locate our position in the map with the help of compass and a topographical map. And then we have microscope to study the rock thin sections in the laboratory. And these days we have the help of electron microscope, microprobe, transmission microscope, and other sophisticated equipments. Now, along with my study during the college, I got interested in mountaineering. My father was, when we were very small children, about I was about 6 years old. We went to Nepal. My father got posted there, and in 1953, I uh, met Tenzing and Hillary, who just that year climbed Everest. So they were invited at the Indian embassy where we stayed, and I heard interesting, exciting, adventurous stories about mountaineering at that age. And I got interested in mountain climbing. And fortunately, many years later, during my college days in 1965, I was able to take training at the Himalayan Mountaineering Institute in Darjeeling. I took both basic and advanced training there and met my childhood hero, Tenzing, as you can see in the photograph, and took training directly from him. And after that, I also take advanced training in the Nehru Institute of Mountaineering in Uttarkashi and attended two expedition. Ronti expedition in 1967 were the first all-women expedition from Bengal. And then in 1970, another all-women expedition to a unnamed virgin peak, unclimbed virgin peak in Lahul. We was successful to climb that peak. Myself, along with Sujaya Guho and Kamala Shaha, Sujaya Guho was our leader, was able to climb that peak, and we named it Laluna. Unfortunately, while coming back from the expedition, Sujaya Guho and Kamala Shaha was killed, and it was a traumatic time for me. I was the deputy leader after that to return without two close members, close friends of our team. My PhD study along that during that time was on deformation of pebbles and strain variation on along the Shinghum shear zone in Jharkhand. Those were very interesting days because fieldwork, so far in the college time, the fieldwork was a group activity. We were always going to field, learning everything, but in a group. But during my PhD studies, I had to do this alone. And doing this alone in those days for a young girl, my area was Shinghum shear zone, so it was some places were very, very remote, along jungles, along hills, and I have to walk miles after miles to reach to the area of my study. Since those days, there was hardly any roads, any transport. So we had to come back at the end of the day with our rucksack full of rocks, very heavy rocks, and again slog for another few miles to come back to the place where we stayed. Along with a very young tribal boy, I had many adventures during this period, but I enjoyed it. It was exhausting but very enjoyable. Then in 1970, before submitting my PhD thesis, I joined Geological Survey of India and worked there, served there as a junior geologist for 3 years. In 1973, I got a scholarship which is called Royal Commission for the Exhibition of 1851 scholarship to to carry out postdoctoral research at Imperial College. It was a very prestigious scholarship. Homi Bhabha got this, and I was not at all sure to get this scholarship, but somehow I was selected and was able to carry on research in Imperial College for next 3 years. During that period, I worked mostly in the Scottish Highlands. That was also another exciting adventure, and many times I was doing work. Since it was my project, I was doing work on my own, and uh, had many adventures. One of the incidents I remember that while I was returning from the place with my heavy rucksack full of rocks, I was supposed to come by bus to Inverness to catch a train, but the only bus that travels over there didn't stop at my stoppage at Glacial because it was full. So I didn't know what to do because going back to the youth hostel was a long way with my heavy rucksack, and then I will miss the train. But fortunately, I took a lift um, from a car, and although it was a single car, my supervisor always warned me taking leave for a single man, but I had no option. And it happened that that man was also a geologist. When he was lifting the bag, my rucksack, he asked, "What is there? So why so heavy?" So I said, "Rocks." He said, "Are you a geologist?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Oh my God, I'm also a geologist." And that was a really happy coincidence. And we really discussed geology, local geology, all the way from glacial to Inverness. Then after 3 years, I got another chance for postdoctoral research at Uppsala University at Sweden. There, I had the opportunity to work with Hans Ramberg in his famous laboratory, model simulation laboratory at the Institute of Geology, Uppsala University. And there also I had rare chances of doing field work in the Scandinavian Caledonites. And for 2 summer seasons, I worked alone in a place called Follafoss in near Arctic Circle. And that uh, place, again, it was for the first time they have seen a woman um, geologist working in hammer and mm, climbing rocks and climbing hills in their village. So it was, I have to always answer questions with my rudimentary Norwegian or Swedish to what I was doing, explaining them that I have come all the way from India to study rocks there. Then I also have a chance to work as a summer geologist with the Swedish Geological Survey. We were taken in helicopter to different places in the Caledonite Mountains and carried out work there for 3 months in a very remote corners of the mountain. And I was the only woman in the team of 11 geologists. And it was also another adventurous time, but very exciting time, and I enjoyed it. Although it was very strenuous, but I enjoyed it a lot. Uh, Basically, I'm a structural geologist, and my special interest in the deformation of rocks. And this study involves field work as well as microscopic work in the laboratory, and also analog modeling to simulate those formation of structures which we find in nature. Fieldwork, this is a normal scene of field geologists. You see they were poring over rock. If it's interesting, they will discuss hours after hours about what happened, what could be the possible explanation. And I feel like a detective uh, because just like a detective, we have clues all over the rocks, and you have to see those clues and interpret them to solve the mystery of the rocks, to formulate a evolutionary history of the rocks from those clues. So we, like a very good detective, we observe rocks like our Sherlock Holmes said, normal people only see but do not observe. But we do observe rocks and read them like a book. So, what are the rocks? What do we see in the rocks? We see folds, which indicates that the deformation is under ductile condition at a very depth. And it can be a single layer which is folded, or it can be more complex, a multi-layer got folded, or it can be very complex structure, that is, the area has deformed several times. The more complex it is, the more we enjoy our more work more, because we can then really work hard to interpret the deformation history of the area. Then if we see this kind of structure, which we say Boudinage and Pincenswell, these indicate the area has suffered extension. Like fold indicates the area has suffered compression. These structures indicate that the area has suffered extension. Then whether they're faults or ductile shear zone. Faults is a brittle structure which happened under a brittle condition on the near the crust, where the rocks were behaved as a brittle material, whereas under great depth the rocks behaved in a ductile material, and the same kind of stress will result in formation of ductile shear zones. Here we can see a ductile shear zone at the bottom, cutting across a series of folds. And that's again a very interesting structure. We can determine how much strain the rocks have suffered, what was the succession of the history, and all that. My interest is also to do experiments with analog modeling. Because geological structures take millions of years to form, we simulate those structures in the laboratory, scaling down all the scales, the time, the rock, nature of the rock, and everything, and observes the deformation of the structure and determines what kind of strain is needed, or what direction of strain is needed, and what was the material properties were like. Like on the left side, this is a natural example, whereas we simulate the similar structure in the right side in a model. Now, I was very fortunate to have four mentors who really guided me throughout my life. Professor Shubir Ghosh, with whom I did my PhD study, and then my colleague for several years after I joined Jadavpur University, was my co-worker for many, many years. I learned a lot from him, not only geology, about everything. He was really a kind of friend, philosopher, and guide for me. Then Professor Janet Watson, who was my mentor in Imperial College, she was a remarkable woman. She did her geology in the 1950s, and she became the first president of Geological Society of London. And I was very fortunate to work with him for 3 years. Then Professor Hans Rambach, if there were any Nobel Prize from geology, perhaps he would have got it. He was a brilliant geologist, and in Uppsala, I had him as my mentor. Then Professor John Rabje, another doyen of geology, with whom I also had the chance to learn from. Then I came back after 5 years abroad, I came back to India and joined as a geologist to Survey of India. But then I felt quite restricted, and I left GSI and joined Jadavpur University as a lecturer. And then I had a very enjoyable time at Jadavpur University as a teacher. We had a very research group. Many brilliant students were associated with our group, and they are stars by themselves now. Here is one of our early group of research students, along with Professor Shubir Ghosh. When I started to teach in Jadavpur University in 1982, as you can see, Professor Shubir Ghosh and myself there, and these are our MSc students. This photograph was taken in a field. You can see no female students there. For the first 10 years, there was hardly any female students, and girls didn't choose geology to study. It was not a popular subject amongst girls. But fortunately, when I retired, uh, and there were at least 30% of students in the class were girls. As you can see here, many girl students, girl researcher in a conference of structural geology a few years back. I did a study with the few data available with the female students in geological sciences of Jadavpur University from 1956 to 2019. At the beginning, you can see the percentage was really low. It was totally a male dominated subject till 90s. Then suddenly there was an increase, and now about 30% of the students are girls. There are problems of women geologists because it's a field based profession, and accommodation is always a big headache for women in the field, and sometimes they have to stay for 3 4 months in the field, and to get an accommodation for a single woman is always a problem, especially in remote areas. Then these days there are safety, question of safety. In my time when I was a student or a PhD student, uh, I traveled and did field work on my own in many places and never felt threatened. But these days, that has become a problem for single woman geologists. Then toilet facilities are non-existent. If in a remote area you can manage by going behind the bushes or hills, but most of the places are no more remote. So a woman geologist um has to wait whole day not going to the toilet, and which causes a health problem later on. Then for young women, balancing family and profession was always a problem. But even then, a large number of women geologists are working and doing excellent studies. Now I will just scan over a few of my field experiences in different parts of the world. I studied in Shingum shear zone for many years, doing its structure along the shear zone, and it was a very interesting uh, study too. And uh, we advanced lot of models about the evolution of shear zone there. Another important area of work was on the migmatites of Chotanagpur Gneissic complex in Jharkhand area. In then our study, we did detailed study in Kolar, Kunigal area of Karnataka, Ramgiri area in Andhra Pradesh, and one of the I would just narrate an interesting story about these fields. Whenever we were working in Kolar, and we found a very interesting uh, exposure, and we are studying that one single exposure for whole day. Next, I took a lot of pictures. We always have to take pictures, do sketches, do measurements, so spend all day in that hillock. And next day, I just wanted to take some more pictures. Those days we didn't have digital cameras, we have film cameras. So to be sure that the photographs will come well, so I went walked up to the hill to take some more pictures, and the exposure was gone. Somebody just broken it to pieces. Actually, the villagers watched us spending the um, whole day on a single exposure, they thought there must be, because it was close to the Kolar gold field, so they thought there must be gold there. So they just destroyed those beautiful piece of structural study uh, to find gold. And then while doing work in uh, Ramgiri in near Andhra Pradesh, we worked in a village called Nagasamudram, which means the sea of snakes. And the mining engineer over there warned us that there are snakes everywhere, so you must be very careful in the field. So we were very careful. We were, myself, Professor Ghosh, and two PhD students were there, and we are working on a ridge and always stamping our feet or stroking our um, hammer on the rock to warn, so that if there are any snake, they will go away. So after that, around midday, we sat in a clear, nice place to have lunch. And while we were having lunch, I had my water bottle next to me. And after some time, I took the water bottle and found not a big, a medium-sized snake was coiling around my water bottle, touching my body. And I was so scared and stunned that I just said snake. And my students were surprised. They thought I was joking because I didn't jump, I didn't do any sudden sort of shouting or anything. But when they saw the snake uncoiled, I must have made some movement, so the snake uncoiled and went away. They could see the snake, and it was a great, very venomous snake. So then they saw that I was not joking, and it was actually, I am fortunate that I didn't jump or did not do any sudden movement, so the snake didn't get threatened and or bit me. Next, many years of our research were spent in Fular Shear Zone in Rajasthan. That was my most favorite area of field work. And the rocks are beautiful, they're well exposed. And not only that, they're very complex, and it was a rewarding time to work on those rocks. And we could suggest many new theory about development of those beautiful structures. Then I was very fortunate to work at several places in the world. Most important, of course, were Alps, and I joined about two full field trips in Alps. And the most important field trips were led by Professor John Ramsey in Alps. And the structure of Alps are for any structural geologist, they're a dream location, because you see, about plate tectonics and development of mountains. You can see every stages of development of mountains on the rocks of Alps. And we could uh, have a long field trip and explaining by experts all these structures in different places of Alps, from the root zone to the different Alp structures. And as I say, Professor John Ramsey, the Doyen of Structural Geology, was the leader of the field trip in 2002 and explaining the structures to us. Then I had the opportunity to work in different places of Spain on the Pyrenees. And this is another field workshop in which I was one of the mentor as well as learner in these Pyrenees structures. Here we are some other geologists from Germany, from England, from Spain, and myself. And here is the whole group in front of a wooden structure in Cap de Cruz area of Spain. Then I had the opportunity to do some field work in the Hubei area of China. It was also a very interesting field trip of 2 weeks, joined by famous geologists from all over the world, and some pictures from that. Of course, the most interesting and memorable field work was in Antarctica. When I joined Jadavpur University in 1982, that time India had their expedition to Antarctica in 1982 January. The first expedition was led by Dr. Qasim to Antarctica. I was very interested. So Professor Ghosh suggested, why don't I apply for that? So I volunteered and I wrote an application to the Department of Ocean Development. First, I was told that they are not considering any women scientists. But fortunately, in 1983, I got a telegram to go there for an interview, and then myself and Dr. Aditi Pant was selected as scientists to join the Antarctic expedition along with others. I was able to go there again with the 9th Indian Antarctic expedition in 89-90. Then after 5 years, I got a project to send my students there to do research. So 3 of my students, Shantanu Ghosh, Sugato Hajra, and Shushantu Samanto, did work over there. Shantanu got his PhD doing work in Antarctica. So why scientists are so keen to go to Antarctica? Because it is the only polar continent. And for a glaciologist, the ice shelf contains lots of important information. For a biologist, the fauna and flora are endemic. You can never find them outside Antarctic region. Then geologically, it's important because it's a key piece of the supercontinent Gondwana land. And for a upper atmosphere scientist, you see aurora, ozone hole, and many other features, because there at the polar region, the magnetic lines of force are vertical. Since Arctic region is a sea, so Antarctica is the only place where permanent research station were built, and upper atmosphere can be studied all around the year. Then, as a meteorologist, effects of world weather, Antarctica does control the world weather. And of course, for environmental scientists, it's a benchmark of pollution. So Antarctica has many adjectives. It is the coldest, driest, highest, and the windiest continent. And it contains both geographic and magnetic pole. And the minimum temperature is recorded there in Vostok Station. It's quite a big continent, 4 times the size of India, and it has a huge volume of ice because 98% of the continent is covered by a thick layer of ice. And the maximum depth of the ice sheet is 4.5 kilometer, and average depth is 2.5 kilometer. And the Earth's crust there is depressed by 600 meters. So when we went there both times by ship. So when we crossed that Antarctic circle, after roaring 40s and furious 50s, when there is perpetual stormy region of the sea, we started to see ice, the marine ice, the sea ice, and icebergs. Gradually that become thicker and thicker, and it is called pack ice, because this sea ice uh, gets broken, or they melts in the summer and gets frozen again in the next winter. So these are called pack ice, and this is the most difficult part of the journey of a ship through Antarctica. The ship had to be an icebreaker ship, otherwise it cannot penetrate this frozen sea. This is a picture of our ship taken from a helicopter negotiating through the pack ice. And then the ship enters a clear water, and you can see some pieces of freshly broken ice or fast ice. And because sea ice is saline, it is very brittle. When it breaks like uh, glasses glass pieces. In contrast, the ice sheet on Antarctica, that is the sweetwater ice. The main ice sheet is very thick, about few kilometers in thickness, and when it breaks, it form fractures, and the part of the ice sheet floats on the surrounding ocean of Antarctica and breaks away from the mother ice sheet as icebergs. And then gradually the icebergs gets eroded, gets smaller, and then it becomes small, very small icebergs, growlers. The bigger icebergs are monitored these days from the satellite. So the accident of Titanic will never happen in these days, because they are always monitored, and the ships avoid those big icebergs. But these small growlers can create problem for them. This is the main ice sheet, that is sweetwater ice over Antarctica. The average depth, as I said, is 2.5 kilometer, maximum depth 4.5 kilometer, and it covers 98% of Antarctic landmass, and it contains 90% of the glacier ice of the world and 75% of the world's sweetwater reserve. And the ice sheet is possibly about 15 million years old. When you arrive in Antarctica, there are only two colors, blue and white. It's a white expanse of ice, and the air is very transparent. We are not used to that kind of transparency. So you can see miles after miles, and you always underestimate the distance. And of course, it was summertime, so there were 24 hours sunlight, and hardly any sound around. At places, the ice shows dune-like structures are called sastruges, and this ice shelf contains lots of information about paleoclimate, meteorite, small meteorite, because most of the meteorites get lost if it falls on land or ocean. But in Antarctica, all the meteorites are preserved, and because the ice sheet moves towards the ocean, towards the edges of Antarctica, it gets trapped in the surrounding mountain, which is encircling the uh, coastal region of Antarctica. So there is a uh, lots of scientists who are interested in meteorites looks for them in the Antarctic coast. And of course, when we arrive there, penguins are there. Mostly two types of penguins are there, the Adelis or the emperor. The Adelis are small, very curious. They come closer to you all the time and watch what you are doing. But the emperor are different. They are always very somber and very, because of their big body, they walk very slowly, and they don't like you to be near them. They have thick layer of fat in their body to protect from the cold. And there are seals. Four types of seals are common in Antarctica, and they are different from northern seals because they remain in the water most of the time, because the water temperature is warmer than the outside temperature. So they lost the use of their limbs like northern seals. And the whales, variety of whales are there, and most common are the killer whales. Killer whales are very intelligent animals, and they can attack their enemies in a kind of group, communicating with each other. Our main job in 1983 was to build a research station over there. So the army engineers set their base camp to build the station, and in 1984 February, we had a very bad, sorry, 83 January, after 3 days we reached there, we had a very bad accident. The rotor blade of the helicopter crashed with the crane wire of the ship, and the helicopter broke down. But fortunately, all the 5 members of that helicopter were rescued, and no harm was done, except we lost the helicopter and all the equipments in it. In February 1984, the research station was complete and functional, and it was opened, inaugurated there. I was present there during the inauguration ceremony, and a winter team stayed back for a year to winter over there. In 1990, February.
Professor Sengupta, you have
And,
roughly 5 more minutes. Is that okay?
okay, fine.
Okay, thank you.
So that was closed, and I was also present during the closing ceremony. In 1983, we stayed in tents and walked from tents, which was another exciting time. For 2 months, we stayed in tents, braving the wind, the cold, and everything. Antarctica, as you know, was a part of Gondwana land, and it has lots of fossils which are indicative that one time the Antarctic weather was very warm. I did my work as a geologist over there and did the foundation work during the 83-84. When I went for the second time in 89, there was a research station, Moitri Research Station, and we had a comfortable time staying over there. But unfortunately, we had an accident where 3 geologist members were killed. And I had a traumatic time, but I completed my work, and as planned, because I did not have any other way out, because I had to work on my own, and did a crustal history of that area. So that is my last slide, and it's my advice to my young students that always dream and chase your dream, do hard work, because there will be always obstacles, but never lose heart. And sometimes you may be successful, sometimes you may be not, but the journey itself is worth a try. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sengupta, for this fascinating talk. And are there any questions? I mean, we generally don't have this type of this talk was really excellent. So many new things. Any questions especially from the students or from anybody else? Okay, maybe I can start with something. you mentioned that there was some evidence that Antarctica used to be having a warm climate. And then you had shown the picture of some rocks which itself looked like a fossil. Is that a coincidence
Yes.
or? Okay.
Yes, because in millions of years ago, Antarctica was adjacent to India and Australia, and that time Antarctica was a warm continent, and it has thick forests. It has coal deposits also. So those fossils are found in Transantarctica mountains, and some of the fossils are very similar to what is found in India or Australia. So uh, and they have life also, lots of many kinds of dinosaurs or that period animals of that period.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Anything you want to know about her work or her experience? Okay, if not, let's thank Professor Sengupta once more. Thank you for this very nice presentation.
Oh, welcome, you are most welcome. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.